So my today's talk concerns categorical imperative as a procedure, its formalizations and its application. I'd like to begin with the plan. Well, I'll start by discussing what Kantian moral reasoning might be about, to start with a general definition. Then I'll zoom on the formula of the law of nature, which I will defend or claim to be the central instruction or algorithm for moral deliberation. Then I will proceed to some current or recent formalizations or explications rather of this so-called CI procedure, which I will call CIP for short. And then I will focus on the concept of nature, which is central to this formula and its interpretations. And then I will proceed to revise the CIP or CI procedure to see how the concept of nature plays on or in the steps that are prescribed to us by the procedure. And then I will go on to name the condition that we discover when we try to think through the 4 steps provided in this CI procedure, namely the condition of underdetermination and our ways of dealing with this condition. I should say that the focus of my paper is on points 5 and 6, and I've been working upwards from these points to the top. So the first 4 points of the plan are mere preparation and exposition of what's to come. So I will try to be brief with these 4 points, hopefully leaving some issues very important for discussion. Well, let us begin with the topic Kantian reasoning. Well, in moral reasoning, we're opting for a deontic verdict or obtaining a deontic status for the maxim or for an action that we are envisioning or intending to do. And of course, Kantian way to do is via a maxim and its generalization, universalization, and so on, described or prescribed to us in the formula of universal law. There are 2 approaches to explaining how we do obtain a deontic status of our intentional action. And these are, well, first we might have an intuitive or immediate knowledge of whether it is right or wrong. Or in Barbara Herrmann's terminology, we can just straightforwardly issue a moral judgment upon our intended action and have a deontic verdict. Or we can proceed via moral deliberation, which is a step-by-step procedure, which is demonstrative in nature. So the contrast between intuitive and demonstrative, I think, initiated by Leibniz is handy or useful here. So, and this, of course, there is a place for moral intuitivism, so to speak, in Kant's philosophy. He, for example, says that we have immediate grasp of the moral law as a fact of reason, and we have the understanding of duties requirements upon us, such as duty to self-perfection and the happiness of others. But we still tend to think that Kantian moral reasoning is mainly moral deliberation through the series of steps prescribed to us by the categorical imperative, and precisely, or more precisely, its first formulation. Well, I will follow the convention that claims that there are 4 formulations or formulas of the categorical imperative. There are different views, but the convention seems to be that we have a formula of universal law of nature, or coupled with the formula of the law of nature, formula of humanity, formula of autonomy, and the kingdom of ends. I will focus on formula of the law of nature as a prima facie central moral deliberation, and you can see revise the formulation of this. But before I begin, I would like to note that the other formulas are very important, and I will come full circle to this point in the conclusion. If we are facing problems with the formula of the law of nature and moral deliberation in a step-by-step CI procedure, then the importance of other formulas grows in relation to this first one. And the formula of humanity indeed does provide the matter to the form of the FUL. And the matter is chiefly contained in the notion of Menschheit, of humanity, and it heavily depends on our interpretation of this important, if not central, concept of the answer to Kant's fourth and final question of philosophy. So, formula of humanity is indeed important. We can try to interpret it as a procedure as well, and Pauline Kleinsgeld recent paper does just that. What it is to treat someone as merely as a means. Well, this seems to suggest a procedure for formula of humanity, but I will not look into that. Also important are the other two formulas that provide a teleological perspective or orientate our moral reasoning in the general framework of the universal history and humanity's final ends, and in our progress towards the real ends and so on. So these formulas I will leave aside and focus on the FUL and FN, which we'll collectively call FL. Well, when trying to explain what Kant means by reasoning under these formulas, we run into problems, of course, which I try to summarize as those at the input, those at the output, and those that are related to the feedback that is possible when we engage in the reasoning under FLN. Well, the problems of input can be separated into two but interrelated problems of relevant act description, which again seems to fall into two or be separated into two sub-problems. We have to describe our motives or our intention, and this is connected with the problem known as motivational opacity. And we also have to describe the event that we would like to be caused somehow by our intention that is coming out of our capacity for freedom and so on, or for Willkür at least. So this relevant act description problem is the first one we are facing. And while solving it, we are approaching the next one, which is the choice of level of generalization for our maxim. It can be very general or it can be very specific. And we are facing the Scylla and Charybdis of overload of duty on the one hand. If we are very general, we derive duties via FL. And then we are generally failing in fulfilling these duties. We have conflicts of duties and what Honore O'Neill calls overload of duty. If we are, on the other hand, too specific in formulating our maxims, then we come to conclusions that there are no duties at all. If we can include all the specificities of our circumstance into action, we can just push our maxim through the FL or CI procedure to succeed, to get a positive deontic verdict or to secure its permissibility. So this is also undesirable and problematic. So we have to look for the golden mean between the two. Or at least we have to specify the situations when we are to go for the duty derivation or to go for more specific moral deliberation, to use Barbara Herman's terminology again. These are the problems that we are facing on the input. And there are problems with the output. We have to interpret what it is for a maxim to contradict itself or some other premises of our moral reasoning. So the contradiction is generally separated into that of in conception and in the will, in willing on volition. Various authors name it differently. And there are subcategories provided or developed by Christine Korsgaard or again by Pauline Kleingeld. And there are several others. Well, I will not look into volitional contradictions. So the green denotes that I will focus on those contradictions that emerge in conception, in thinking about our situation, but they will have bearing on the volitional contradictions as well. Then finally, there is a problem of feedback or maxim fiddling, to borrow the term. That means that once we run through our CI procedure and get a negative deontic verdict, we are tempted to go back to the stage of input to reformulate our maxim to better suit the requirements of the categorical imperative procedure and hopefully get a positive permissibility at the output. Or if we don't get it, we can go on in circles of maxim fiddling until we succeed. So the problem is how to prevent us from being such moral opportunists, and if there are rules or ways to securely do so. So this, I think, sums up in the broadest sense the sorts of contradictions and problems that we need to address if we are to succeed in explaining what it is to reason via the categorical imperative, particularly via its first formulation. If we don't, well, there is a point of view which is quite prominent that categorical imperative is not a procedure at all. For example, it can be taken as expression of our moral sensibility and not as a procedure or algorithm to generate particular deontic verdicts for our intended actions or policies. So if we are to defend that categorical imperative does provide a procedure, we are to explain this situation. I will briefly present 3 attempts at formulating or formalizing this CI procedure. First one was done, to my knowledge, by Nora O'Neill, and then we have one offered by Christine Korsgaard. And then I will just go through them very briefly and then focus on the one offered by John Rawls, which is all 3 are in line. There is no apparent contradiction between the 3. So I'll focus on Rawls' version, which is rather detailed, or seems rather more detailed. So my claim of my strategy in arguing is to focus on these highlighted elements of the CI procedure. So we are to understand nature, well, to get a grasp of what it is to understand nature and to what extent we're capable of understanding it, and what it is to do it, try to do it as best we can. And so the notion of nature, as you can see, features prominently in both, of course, in Kant's original formulation, it is written in bold, and in Rawls's explication of the CI procedure. So we are to understand what nature might mean in this situation. And I think there are 3 ways, or at least 3 ways to treat this concept. First is to take it to mean the world of understanding in Kant's words, and not the world of sense. We are to envision purely rational or world of practical laws or principles, and then to adjoin our maxim to this world, somehow pushing it or making it to transgress the border between its empirical origins, because a maxim is a particular principle that applies to Kant's definition explains it as an expression of our situation. So we are to abstract from this content and to add our maxim to this world of pure principles. If this operation is, well, there are several reasons why this is probably not the meaning Kant intended for this operation. There are textual problems. There are objective principles, but the maxim is specific. It is defined in contrast to these objective principles. There are conceptual problems. We devoid our maxim of meaning when we try to generalize it, or when we try to generalize in the maxim our situation, if we push it too far. Of course, to some extent it is necessary. Then a formula of the law of nature becomes expedient. Why even mention nature at all? Why not just use FUL as the template or as an algorithm for moral reasoning? And for FLN typic of FUL, as Kant explains it in the critique of practical reason. Another option is to take it to mean a natural law. Well, again, Kant's definition is that from the metaphysics of morals is that natural law rests only on a priori principles. So we are to take our maxim and force it into the role of a priori principle. Well, this position seems to be reducible to either one or three. We can, by justifying natural law by a priori principles, we are effectively appealing to point one. Or we can go to the third understanding of nature, which is, of course, given in between the FUL and FLN in the groundwork. And it echoes the one given in the critique. And it also is relevant or related to the one given in the metaphysical foundations of natural science. So this is a very congested argument for an important step, that we should treat nature in the sense three, not in other senses. Then I have to introduce some formalizations. Let N be nature for us, or our world model, or result of our trajectory through the world, or system of beliefs. And then N in brackets, in square brackets, I'll call it objective nature, single unified spatio-temporal world of persisting bodies and persons that N is about, to borrow the definition, to do it in the Straussonian vein. And then we also have to remember that there is N of things in themselves. We'll bracket this situation of transcendental idealism and all the problems that are related to it, but we'll just keep it in mind. So as best we can, that is mentioned by Rawls, effectively means that we have to follow epistemic imperative, namely try to, for our N to fully represent N, objective nature. So now our representation or understanding of nature has to become as objective as possible to cover the manifold of all possible experience and so on. Well, this is impossible, of course. So we have this equation in which our particular N, nature for us, is lesser than nature in the objective sense, and there is the transcendental idealism looming on the horizon. Now, nature as objective nature is the object of cosmology and of psychology. And this division seems to become the basis for motivational opacity, which is related to psychology. Our mental states are appearances, and we cannot have full knowledge of them. So this is fundamental. It's no accident that Kant is facing this, that motivational opacity arises. It's built into Kant's broader metaphysical picture. And also event description becomes a problem because of cosmology this time, because we are, again, we don't have the complete picture of N. Let us be armed with this and quickly re-examine the CI procedure. step 1 requires us to do X in circumstances C in order to bring about Y unless Z. And Rawls explains that these are action, our understanding of circumstances, and the state of affairs we want to bring about. And Z is the moral considerations we might have to refrain from X. So let us think about our circumstances C. They are fraction of nature as we understand it, which is itself a fraction of objective nature. We could try to make C as close to N as possible, but we are unlikely to succeed. Namely that our understanding or awareness, situational awareness of circumstances will not equal our full knowledge of nature as we have it. Then same is true about X, which is not, our belief about X is not what actually comes about once we fulfill our action. And the same is true about our intentions and the state of affairs we want to bring about. Our understanding of what's going to happen as a result of our action is not the same as the actual result. This means that adding our Y, our state of affairs we want to attain to nature N is not a simple addition operation. It sets into motion the whole system of N as represented in our beliefs. Step 2. Everyone is to do X in circumstances C in order to bring about Y unless Z. So we are introducing the plurality of persons. Each has NP, CP, XP, YP, which face the same problems as our own. So there is a degree of discrepancy between the understanding and the actual or objective states of affairs. We are to generalize across all P's. So we are to consider the set of P's, every member of PX desiring YPX under conditions CPX will do XPX. This is a operation that is hardly possible to full extent. So we have to understand and accept its limitations. Our understanding of other people's worldviews, incentives, acts, our forecasts about the outcomes of our acts are incomplete. So we are to universalize it. Rather, yes, everyone always does X in circumstances C, etc. In fact, this removes P's agency, and Rawls explain it that persons are doing X as if it was implanted in us by natural instinct. So we don't have a choice to do otherwise. Then step 4, which is the most complex. This step prescribes us to present nature N as the set of laws, but we also, to which we add our own Li, which we envision to become a law of nature. What we have to remember that Kant's definition of nature covers not only laws, but also appearances, or we can say physical events. So we are to have them in mind. Now, the laws and events don't come in neat pairs, L1, A1, Li, AI, etc. Rather, each event is a result of a multitude of laws. And the law that we are introducing would result not in a single event or fact, but rather would affect, ramify over the set of events in a not entirely predictable fashion. So this is, again, not a straightforward, but a fuzzy operation we are not in position to do entirely successfully. And then there is a sufficient time problem, which, what time is sufficient to have our maxim or purported law work itself out? perhaps there are consequences that are not foreseeable to us at that moment, but will become evident when it might be too late. So what I would like to claim for this reconstruction briefly, because I'm running out of time, is that underdetermination is the name of the condition that we are facing in CIP. Underdetermination is defined in Stanford Encyclopedia to address the current state-of-the-art definition as the evidence available to us at a given time may be insufficient to determine what beliefs we should hold in response to it. Therefore, we can adopt it to our situation of Kantian moral deliberation. The evidence available to us at a given time may be insufficient to determine what deontic status we should ascribe to the maxim and the action we are considering. Now, underdetermination falls into two subcategories, or is said to fall. Holistic and contrastive underdetermination. And there is place for both in Kantian moral deliberation. Let me start with contrastive. There are three ways to, or at least three situations I could come up with that seem relevant, fall under the definition of underdetermination. One is that every agent P, whether individual or collective, is always in a state of transition from one n at point at time 1 to another P at time t2. So this means that at least some of the maxims adopted in NT1 may need to be revised in NT2 in the face of new or changed theoretical insights and factual evidence. In other words, CIP can yield opposing deontic verdicts for the same or identified as the same. Of course, there is a problem of identity inherent in this situation. Maxims at different times. For example, P has learned that plastic bags are harmful to the environment and refuses to use them, which he previously thought acceptable. By adopting some maxim in the face of NT1, we often do so provisionally and perhaps can even foresee or estimate the probability of having to revise it in the face of NTN at a later time. Apparently, this probability will vary for different maxims. Some will be more robust, some will be more changeable. But as our conditions change, many of our previously verified maxims will be falsified. The whole emergent branches of ethics, like environmental ethics and animal ethics, serve as testimony to this condition. Second situation, some or perhaps most P may at some particular moment have porous ideas about N or be in a state of uncertainty, choosing between incompatible models of N, objective reality. The decision-making under uncertainty has recently become a topic of discussion in the Kantian terms. For example, P may be indecisive about whether to agree to take a vaccine X against disease Y with conflicting but equally trustworthy or untrustworthy theoretical assessments of its risks and effectiveness and so on. Our maxims in such situation would be underdetermined. Now, third situation, different individuals or groups may have, and more often than not do have, at least some mutually contradictory beliefs about objective nature or reality, for which they rationally and sincerely, to use Rawls' terminology, draw moral justifications for mutually exclusive acts. Nationalistic beliefs provide a good example of such situation. Two neighboring people might have different names for the same fact, like Battle of Grunwald versus Battle of Tannenberg, or First Battle of Tannenberg, or Battle of Žalgiris. So this, whether or not unanimity in or overcoming this situation is possible is a big problem. Now let us briefly proceed to holistic underdetermination. Let us imagine that our CIP has produced a contradiction in conception or in volition. Kant clearly enjoins us to abandon the intention to action and as this action is described by our maxim. And this would indeed be the only option in the face of a complete, rigorous, singular, and universal N. However, as we have seen, we are lacking such N, so our response can vary. This circumstance opens up other possibilities for interpreting the situation of contradiction. First, it seems to reinvigorate the maxim fiddling propensity already discussed. This operation is restricted in a situation where we have a single or rigid end, but is possible in our situation. Second, in a situation of holistic underdetermination, we need not limit ourselves to fiddling with our maxims only, for we can also fiddle with the whole of its constituent background N. Instead of assuming that the law Li derived from the maxim contradicts N, we can rationally and sincerely suggest that the contradiction lies in our very understanding of one or more laws and and facts that constitute nature, as we take it as a set of laws and facts or events. And it is not our maxim and our action that are subject to revision. Instead, we might think that the laws ought to be revised, and with them our understanding of facts. There is not enough evidence to falsify our maxim and prevent us from X in order to Y. Instead, there is an error in the structure of N, which must be modified to eliminate the contradiction. The laws of nature have no qualitative difference or priority over the law Li derived from my maxim. The most they can claim is chronological precedence, but older does not mean better. Their advantage comes down to a convention that we might try to change. In other words, we might prefer not to change our maxim, but bet on revising or revolutionizing the whole paradigm in Kant's sense. But we can go even further than revolutionizing the background knowledge. This conceptual revolution might prove sufficient if we can come up with a sufficiently robust and convincing N prime, accommodating the same empirical content than our previous or the paradigm N that we are arguing against. However, the failure to produce such successful N prime need not stop us either, because we can target the facts instead of the laws. We can claim that the problem of contradiction of our maxim gives rise to lies not at the level of theory, that is at the set of laws, within the set of laws, but at the level of facts that give rise to laws. We can claim that N deforms or misconstructs or perhaps colonizes reality, objective reality, N in square brackets. For example, we may claim that certain social laws, institutions, or even the organization of society as a whole are morally wrong, that they are spontaneously or intentionally constructed so that our quite morally justifiable maxims come into conflict with the established structures of N, in brackets, objective reality, produced by the systemic injustice of the dominant paradigm N, and that we ought to cancel or deplatform the facts that prevent our or falsify our new paradigm N prime. And that leads us towards not a Kuhnian revolution, but a revolution in the sense of Lenin, and to drastic and dramatic results. So I would like to draw a conclusion. Does this reconstruction of CI procedure lead us to moral relativism or to full-blown situationism? Not necessarily. It might seem that it does, but first, quite often CIP generates fairly reliable solutions, or at least grants us better awareness of the problematic situation in which we need to make a decision. Even if CIP does not generate an unproblematic solution, for example, in Kant's and Constant's case of flying to the murderer at the door, we are left with better awareness of the conflicting moral requirements and of our particular situation and its possible scenarios, for example, that our friend might have already left the building. Second, the recognition of underdetermination can to some extent protect us from the excessive rigorism or principlism or formalism that is often imputed to Kantian ethics. By recognizing the relativity, the fluidity and degree of uniqueness and incommensurability of our networks of maxims, at least in parts of these networks, some of which are more prone to change than others, some of which are more general and common, while others are limited to particular or local contexts, etc., in Wittgensteinian, late Wittgensteinian style. Thus, we get a more descriptively accurate picture of our actual moral life. And finally, Kantian moral deliberation is not in some unique situation. Underdetermination is characteristics, and perhaps even to a greater extent, of consequentialist strategies that rely entirely on the analysis of consequences. From what I can tell, I might stand corrected. Both acts and rules in utilitarian deliberation depend on our understanding of nature in the third sense considered. Meanwhile, a Kantian has other resorts available, namely those, and now I come full circle, those of the formula of humanity, loaded with the idea of human dignity irreducible to nature, and the formula of autonomy and of the kingdom of ends, appealing to our autonomous capacity for teleological design of the system of all human actions and suggesting criteria for such design. In the condition of underdetermination, their importance for moral deliberation and moral judgment increases significantly, and this is another and last conclusion that I would like to draw. Thank you.